Hello and welcome to everyone listening to the Written Melanin Podcast, the place where you come to get your weekly dose of melanated creativity. I'm your host, CM Lockhart, an author of fantasy books featuring Black girls who aren't all that nice, and the owner of the Melanin Library, an online database of books written by Black authors. And in this space, I invite you to listen to the journeys of Black authors with the hope that you'll gain something from it. I'm glad that you're here. And today, you guys, we are here with the one, the only M.H. Ayinde. She was born in London's East End. She is a runner, a lapsed martial artist, and a screen time enthusiast. Her debut novel, A Song of Legends Lost, the first in an epic fantasy trilogy, will be published by Orbit and Saga Press in 2025, which is already out. So go ahead, grab that, do yourself a favor. Her short fiction has appeared in Fire Literary Magazine, FNSF, Fantasy Magazine, and elsewhere. And she was the 2021 winner of the Future Worlds Prize. She lives in London with 3 generations of her family and their Studio Ghibli obsession. Welcome to the podcast, M.H. Ayinde.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on here, or rather for coming back. So, just so you guys are aware, this episode happened a while ago. And then, unfortunately, the audio did not save. So the podcast episode could not come out. And I was devastated. I was hurt. I was just like, oh my God, I have to call M.H. Ayinde and let her know that that amazing conversation that we had never happened.
Oh, I think it was for the best because my headphones were playing up. And so I was really distracted by that. So hopefully I'll be more locked in this time as well.
So that being said, assuming this is our first time or our listeners' first time interacting with you, please let them know more about you. Tell us about you. Tell us about your book, A Song of Legends Lost, all the good things.
Hello, I am Modupe Ayinde. Excuse my Yoruba pronunciation because my Yoruba pronunciation is awful. I am a writer of mostly fantasy, although I do dabble in science fiction with my short fiction. I am probably best known for the Invoker trilogy, book 1 of which is A Song of Legends Lost, and it's out now. Book 2 will be out in spring in the UK and June in the US and Canada. How to describe it? It's a big beast of an epic fantasy novel. My pitch that I usually give people is Final Fantasy summons but ancestors. It is a multi-POV epic set in a land where warriors can summon their ancestors in battle, and it has ancient tech. It is inspired by a number of pre-colonial cultures, and I've come to think of it as my decolonization book. The more I think about my thought processes and the characters and what they go through, I've started to think of it as my decolonization book.
And honestly, you guys, you need to go get it, go get into it. I can vouch that her pen game, her writing, on point, on point.
Oh,
so I'm not going to get too much into it, but know that Modupe can write. Okay. Trust me when I say that. That being said, let's talk about your publishing journey, because you mentioned that book 2 is coming out. And just so you guys know, book 1 is a chonker. So I am talking to my true fantasy homies right now. Like, I'm talking about, you want to sit down and you are ready to get into 500-600 pages of fantasy, multi-point of view, ancient tech, ancestral summons. Like, you are ready to lock in, right? So that being said, the fact that it came out 2025, fall 2025, correct? Because it came out August?
June, I think.
So summer?
Summer. So yeah, US release was summer.
So book 1 coming out summer 2025, and then book 2 coming out, spring, summer 2026. That is a very fast release. How does that make you feel?
Terrified. And I have to say, book 2 is even more of a chonker, for which I am endlessly apologizing to everyone. Yeah, I mean, I did really push myself to finish it on time because I wanted to have done the bulk of the work before book 1 came out, and my head just went all over the place with all the stuff that comes from debuting. So that was part of the reason.
I can understand that. So what can you tell us about book one as far as like how you had this idea to, okay, it is a physical book out in the world that people are, it's in their hands, they're reading it. Like, what was that process like for you?
The process of getting there, it was long. I sent my first query letter 20 years ago now. And I had always written big epic fantasies. That was the thing I wanted to write. And what I would do was write a book. The first time I sent it to an agent, I got a very nice rejection. One agent, one rejection. I was like, oh, this is trash. Chucked it in the bin and spent a couple of years writing something else. And I rinsed and repeated for a long time. It took a long time for me to really get the courage to query properly. And maybe we'll talk about that a bit more later on. But specifically this book, I wanted to write something that I would have wanted to read, something that felt like the epics that I read in the 80s and 90s, but that pulled on cultures that were important to me. And I also love the bit in Lord of the Rings where Aragorn summons the army of the dead. And that was a huge source of inspiration to me, along with the Final Fantasy games, which involve summoning. And that was a huge source of inspiration to me in terms of creating the world of A Song of Legends Lost. The other thing to say about the process of this book specifically is that the universe that it's set in, I first started writing in that universe when I was a teenager. So it's existed for a long time. And I've written different bits and pieces at different time periods in that universe. So by the time I came to write this book, I knew that universe very well and had a lot to draw upon, which definitely helped as well.
Okay, so there are two bits of that I definitely want to expound upon for our audience. The first one is I want to definitely talk about querying properly because I feel like that's something that as authors, especially Black authors, we should talk about and kind of demystify a little bit. But after that, I want to come back to working on this project since you were a teenager and how that has kind of changed and morphed over time. So
yeah,
one then the other. So let's talk about querying first as like a gentle aside of like, you mentioned querying properly.
yeah.
So I know that there are authors listening to this who are entering into this journey of being like, I know that this is what I want, but like, how do I go about this? What do I do? Because there is so much advice on the internet of like how to go about things, how to do this, how to write, a pitch, how to write a query letter, how to do yada, 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 how to vet an agent, because that's also a really big part of all of this. So when you say query properly, like, can you expound on that? And like, what would you also say to people who are trying to query properly?
Yeah, so what you said at the start, I think particularly as Black authors, we do a lot of self-rejection. As I said, I would send my book to one agent and then chuck it in the bin. I started querying before there was, in the early days of the internet, there was not a lot of information available the way, certainly not as much as there is now. There's good and bad points about the amount of information available now. But I did a lot of self-rejecting. I really struggled to see myself for a long time in the position that I wanted to be in. And that's half the battle sometimes, is being able to visualize where you want to be and what you want that to look like. And I was convinced when I got one rejection, oh, it's because the book's trash, I'll write something else. But I think what changed for me was 2020, as the world changed a lot then. I was home a lot more. I lived with someone vulnerable, so we didn't leave the house for about 4 months. I mean, I had a lot of time. I was still doing my day job, but it's amazing how much time socializing and all these sorts of things take up. So I had more time to dedicate to writing. That period in time forced a lot of us to reassess our values. I had not long since turned 40, which is a milestone age for a lot of people. And I had said to myself, look, I'd read enough then about querying to know things like basically when you get a rejection, all it means is that agent doesn't think they're the right person for that book at that time. And those things are so important. So I had told myself I would write a book, finish it by a certain date, because I was spinning a lot of wheels at that point, and that I would query it until I ran out of agents that I was interested in working with. I would not give in to, you know, the voice that said, oh, it's because it's rubbish, start again. So I sent there's different ways of approaching it, and I don't want to go on and on about querying too much and get too much into the nitty gritty of it. But a lot of people talk about whether you should query in batches or send out loads at once. I queried in batches mainly because I'm a tinkerer. I like to tinker. So I thought, let me see if I get any feedback, and then maybe I'll do some tweaks. Although there's a whole conversation to go there about whether you should adjust things based on feedback, because it's always about personal preference. And also you can end up spinning the wheels a bit there. So I sent out my queries in batches, and I told myself, you're going to stick with it. You're going to keep going. And while I was querying, I wrote another book, which is something, well, I didn't finish it, but I started writing another book, which is something I had read and as a piece of advice, and I would definitely recommend. It takes the focus off the querying and means you've got something else to move on to.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about it, because the last time we spoke, I was still working on my book, Project Necromancer. For those of you listening to this, you might already know if you're part of the community, but recently I started the process of querying my book to agents and things. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on it, because I'm not going to say go down the rabbit hole, because I will say that I'm unique in the sense of I was like, I'm going to shoot my shot, and if I miss, I know that I can just publish this myself and I'll be all right. Yeah. Right. So different mindset, and I acknowledge that. But it's also interesting because it's as I was doing my research of okay, well, how do I navigate this in a way that I feel comfortable navigating it? As in, how do I present myself with my best foot forward? How do I do this professionally? How do I write, my query letter, my pitch, and how do I kind of vet these agents? Because I feel like a lot of suggestion on the internet is to talk to the authors who they represent and see if they like them. And I'm like, okay, that is a level of extroversion that most authors do not have, to just go up to a random person 100%. On the internet, slide into their DMs and be like, hey, I know you don't know me, but do you like your agent? It's who's going to say no to a random person on the internet? Are y'all trying to catch me?
Yeah.
I'll slip it, right? So I find that to be incredibly helpful in how you're do it in batches, and then also find something else to take your mind off of it. Because I think something that I'm learning firsthand currently, because currently in this current moment, I have sent my requests out. I'm waiting to hear things back. I'm updating my community as I go through this process. So it's just hey, this is the behind the scenes of it, right? But it's the waiting, right? Because I could definitely say for indie publishing, it's very fast. It's okay, I'm gonna send this off to my beta readers. I'm gonna give them 2 weeks, and then I'm gonna keep it moving, right? Yeah. The waiting and the silence, you definitely need something else to focus on. So for me, I've been shifting my focus over to the Melanin Library and the events that I'm doing, and etc. But I can only imagine what you were going through in 2020, locked in the house. Waiting to hear back from someone, oh my God, you fill every minute, and every email that comes through, you're is this it? Is this the one? And you're just oh no, it's just some random spam person trying to get me to do something else. Who asked you? And I know that I'm going on a slight tangent. I'm going to bring it back, I promise. But in this current era, let me tell you, my dupe, I'm why? Who gave y'all my email address? Because why are y'all emailing me all of a sudden when I'm waiting on important emails to come through? Yeah. That's really disrespectful. Really disrespectful.
I had a physical response to my email ping. In the end, I had to take all the notifications off, because every time it went, and I have 6 email addresses and, so many things I'm subscribed to. I got a physical, my stomach will go, soup. And I was this is not good for my long-term health. So yeah, the struggle is real. It's really bad.
The struggle is real. I'm going to end this tangent slightly with saying, if y'all are listening to this and you are thinking about querying, I would say for sure go into it with some confidence. Know that you wrote your story. If you're putting your best foot forward, and if you're putting your best foot forward. My husband gave me some really dope advice that has kind of settled my spirit in ways that I wasn't expecting. And he was basically if God has it for you, no one can take it away from you. And if God does not have it for you, there's nothing that you can do to take it for yourself.
That is a good way of looking at it, and a really rational way of looking at it as well.
He's so grounded and logical. I'm like, how do we end up together? How does this work? Because I'm definitely the dreamer, like, oh my God, it's going to be great. And he's like, look, feet on the ground. It is great, but also it's fine if it doesn't work out. But yeah, that being said, let's redirect this conversation a little bit, because there's another aspect that you mentioned previously, talking about how you have been working on the world of A Song of Legends Lost since you were a teenager. And I feel like in this current climate, right, with book talk and book thread, social media in general, I think we have an influx of people online being like, I've been working on this since I was a teenager. And I'm not going to name any names, but there was definitely an author in the indie space who published a book recently and had a lot of support for it pre-release, and then it came out, and then they were like, what happened? Obviously you did not fall into that trap of, this world is big and I've lived with it for so long, and now the book is out and it's not good. You did not fall into that trap. So I would ask, like, how did this world grow with you, right? From its original inception into, you putting something together where it's just like, this is finally what it's meant to be.
Yeah. I think one of the key things about that, because we can all think of examples of writers who created their worlds when they were teenagers. I think for me, one of the main things two main things. One is I wrote a lot of words before this book was published, but I completed probably about 4 or 5 novels, and 2 of them were not set in this universe at all. The other thing to mention is the short fiction I've written, which, as I say, some of it is science fiction, is all very different. I think having other worlds that you work on is really important. So this wasn't my one thing, even though it was the thing that I'd stuck with the longest. The other thing to say about it is, as I mentioned, I had written books set in different eras of this universe, and they were so different. I don't know that I could even say they would be recognisably of the same origin if I were to hand them to you now. So I feel that when I say I've been working on this universe since I was a teenager, a lot of that is emotional in a sense that I was trying to create certain vibes, and I'm still trying to create certain vibes. I feel like with each book there's a certain tone to it, a certain thing you're trying to get out of your system. It's the same thing that I was working on, but the world itself evolved a lot. And then in terms of the other part of your question about how did it grow with me, how did it change with me, I think a lot of it was giving myself permission to write the things that I wanted to write. Growing up, there were not many Black authors that I had access to writing in the SFF space, and seeing people like N.K. Jemisin get published and write amazing books that just got, hit me straight in my core. It really gave me a lot of confidence. It really shows what a difference having people that you can relate to, that maybe have a worldview that is similar to yours, that enable you to see yourself. It really shows what a difference that makes. That certainly helped me. So a lot of the evolution of this world was giving myself the permission to write the way that I wanted to, and the thing that I wanted to write, instead of trying to fit myself in a box, which I feel subconsciously I was doing a lot of. And then on a more practical level, how it evolved, a lot of it was reining myself in. If you've read it, you'll know how much I love detail, and I can go off on a nerdy tangent forever. So I had to think, all right, what things do I want to focus on? Believe it or not, I cut characters and I cut plot lines, even though you end up with this big sprawling epic. I have cut things. So it was homing in on the story that I really wanted to tell, and giving myself permission to write the way that I wanted to write, focusing on the people that I wanted to focus on. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's sort of how it evolved. And this time period that I'm writing in, we're talking about like thousands of years of history that I had created. I hadn't written anything else in this time period. So for me, it was fresh.
No, I mean, that does answer the question, because I think when we start talking about worlds and writing in worlds, I think you hit on really important points of like writing what you want to write and not trying to shoehorn a story into a world just so that it fits the market, I'll say.
Yeah.
Especially when, none of us exist solely in a bubble. Like, no matter how introverted we are, we do exist in the world, and we see the trends, we see the tropes, we see the things that are successful, we see the things that get a lot of money and promotion, we see the things that kind of slide under the radar, and we're like, this is incredible. Why didn't this get more love? Why didn't this get more support? So on and so forth. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that, like, as Black authors, we understand that there's a level of, like, race and colorism that can play into that conversation. But I think at the end of the day, what you're hitting on is that you, as an author, have to write what you want to write and write the story that you want to tell. And I think in your answer, there's also this underlying thing where it's just like, you have to have a passion for it. You have to love it, because it's not just, ooh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I'm going to say this anyway because I feel like it needs to be said. It's not laziness. It's not like, oh, I've already done the work of building this world and therefore I have to write something in it because I don't want to have to do this again. It is, I created this world and I love this world, and this world is interesting and this world is fun and there's so much to be done in this world. Therefore, I want to write in this world as much as I can, and I want to explore it as much as I can. And then when you've done the big, wild, sprawling thing and you've written the story for yourself, then you can come back and you can, like you said, you can cut characters, you can tighten up plot lines, you can tighten up the story and get it ready for someone who's not you. But there has to be a love and a dedication and a passion. And I think when it comes to fantasy as a whole, there has to be an appreciation, I'll say, not necessarily like a love, right? But there has to definitely be an appreciation for the world building that goes into it, because, the character, this, not the character, the setting is a character in and of itself when you are talking about writing a big, sprawling, epic fantasy. Like, you don't get to just throw it in the background and then forget about it, because there are rules. And even if you don't think there are rules, there are rules.
100%.
Like, everything has a rhyme and a reason to it, even if the rhyme and the reason is outside of the rhyme and reason that we function with in real life.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there was a whole debate about magic systems recently, and my take is it's a spectrum. There's always rules. You might not know them. They might be very sketchy, but they're there. So, and yeah, that extends to wider world building for sure. But you do need to love, apart from anything, you need to love your world, because if you do get picked up and you do get a publishing deal, you're going to read your book 60 billion times. So you better love it.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that is kind of like the test of a true, I don't say like a true author, but like a genuine from the heart, you are in the right place, is when you're reading your work back and you're like, oh, I'm having a good time. Like, this is what I wanted to read. And I feel like, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but I know for me, I know that I've gotten to the right heart of the story, because the thing is, and I feel like we could have a whole conversation about rewrites too, but I feel like when you are reading your work and you're like, this is the story that I would have wanted to read, this is the story that I would pick up from a store, or that I would have given to my younger self, or whatever your connotation is for your story, right? Once you get to that point, and that's when you know that, like, you've hit gold. That's when you know it's like, yeah, I did the thing. Like, this is it.
And it's the best feeling. And I used to think that I would never get to that point, because I'm not great at reading my own stuff back, and I will pick at it. But there was a point when I was editing A Song of Legends Lost where I was like, this is what I wanted to do. This is working. It was the best feeling. And it's quite hard sometimes to pull that point out and let yourself see it, and it's hard to get to that point, because it's always imperfect. What is in your head is never going to be perfectly replicated on the page, but it's about as getting as close to as you can in a way that is recognizable to yourself, I think.
Absolutely. And I think there's also the fact that the more you write, the better you get at it. So the more you go through your story, when you come back to the beginning, you've already went through the story. So, like, you've improved, even no matter how big or small that improvement is. You can come back to it and be like, oh, well, I can change this or I can change that. I know for myself, I've gotten to a point where with all of my drafts, I'm like, okay, am I making it better or am I making it different?
Yes. That is
you know?
so important. And that is a lesson I learned over many years, for sure for me. And now I'm better at recognizing that cut off.
Absolutely. Because when you start getting to a point where you're just making things different, it's time to move on. It's
Yeah.
time to let it go. But that being said, I know that there's so many parts of this process, and there's the drafting, there's the rewriting, there's the world building, there is, I don't know if you do character sheets or character building, all of that. Like, there's so many aspects to bringing a book outside of your mind onto the page and getting it, like you said, as close as possible to what you imagined. So I think I have an idea of what this answer is for you, but like, what is your favorite part of the process? Like, if you had to pick one thing and you'd be like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the part that I love. This is the part that I live for. What part is that for you?
It's the editing. As you might gather from me describing myself as a tinkerer, I love editing. I love, if I had all the time in the world, I could sit and just contemplate a single sentence for hours. I would love to somehow have some kind of time stop ability where I could do that for every book, because I do feel they say that the writing of the book comes in the editing, or maybe they say comes in the rewriting. I'm not sure how the phrase goes, but that is where the magic happens, I think. And what I love about that part of the process, apart from the hair splitting about words, because I'm a bit of a word nerd, is the fact that you have something tangible by the point you're editing. You don't have the fear of the blank page. You have something to work with, but you still have all the possibilities ahead of you if you're not scared of rewriting and tearing a thing apart, which I'm not. I love doing that. So for me, probably the most satisfying and enjoyable part of the process where I'm at my most relaxed is the editing, and I feel there is so much that can be done in that stage.
I agree. I think I'm one of those complicated people because the thing is, I'm a Libra, and so my mind is always changing. And so when I'm in the drafting part, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get to the editing. I love the editing. And then when I get to the editing, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to start drafting again. And just be able to just do whatever I want. I don't have to make it make sense yet.
I know what you mean. I mean, I'm like that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I love whatever part of the process I'm not currently in.
That's real writer sentiment there, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I feel like I definitely want to talk about is the rise of romantasy in the space, especially since you wrote a book, and one of the things that I love is that you wrote a fantasy book. Like, it is for the fantasy homies. It is for the people who came here for the world and the magic and the character and the arc. And I'm not shading romance. Not shading romance. I think romantasy is great. But I also think there is a conversation to be had in the space for fantasy that is whole fantasy. It's about the adventure. It's about the characters. It is about the world more so than these two characters getting together. So I want to know, like, is there any romance in your book? Because I know that there are some people listening to this who want to know, is there romance in the book? But also, like, how do you feel about navigating spaces as a purely fantasy author instead of a romantasy author?
So there is no romance. I mean, if you squint really hard and
Not if you squint.
use your imagination, maybe there is a character who is, one of the POV characters is in a long-term relationship. There are a lot of established relationships. You could, as I say, squint with certain characters and maybe see something, but it's basically no, there's no romance in the book. It's not a romantasy. And when I started out, the label did not exist. I mean, it is a relatively new label, but even, it was not a thing when I started writing. And I definitely I think romantasy is amazing. It's when I think that writing romance well is a particular skill. And I think that the rise of romantasy in the SFF space has brought a lot of new readers to science fiction and fantasy, readers who would not have dabbled in the genre. I see it all the time in the bookish spaces that I occupy online. I see people that come for the romantasy and then stay for the world building. They're like, oh, you know what? I've had on a bit of a romance break. Have you got anything with this? And then they'll be recommending the sort of fantasy that maybe I'm more familiar with. So on the whole, I think it's a brilliant thing because it's bringing new readers into, I don't want to say the market, that's a horrible capitalist word, isn't it? But it's bringing new readers into the fold. But the flip side of that is that certainly when I was going out on sub, so when my agent was sending my book around to publishers, I was aware that I was, disadvantaged because romantasy is the thing that publishers want to see. And ultimately, publishing is a business. I mean, I don't know how my life would have been different if self-publishing had existed when I started writing, because I didn't even know it was a thing. It wasn't really a thing, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I don't know if I would have chosen a different path if I'd known that was available at that age and when I was at that point in writing, because the fact is publishing is a business and it will chase trends, unfortunately. So I was aware that not as much epic fantasy without romance was being bought, and so that is something that I felt set me at a disadvantage in terms of editors looking at my work. And I do feel there is less of the fantasy that I used to consume and enjoy consuming being published at the moment, which is a shame. But these things come and go. We can all think about the urban fantasy boom and bust, the vampire boom and bust. These things come and go. Romantasy will be there forever. It's always going to be there. But whether we will have the volume of it that we're seeing at the moment for much longer, I'm not sure.
I think that's valid, and I think that's a much larger conversation to be had as well, that publishing is a business. At the end of the day, I think we all like to romanticize the artist aspect of it because we're creators and we sit down and we pour our hearts and our minds and our imaginations onto the page and we are tentatively like, here, I hope you like it, but at the end of the day, when we start putting money into it and we start putting numbers to it, there's a certain level of, like you said, chasing the trends. What does the audience want? How do I sell this? How do I, recoup the investment on this? I think that's valid. I think that there are always going to be two sides of a coin and that they have to work together in order to make things work, right? But I will also admit that there was a time when I was just like, everything has romance in it, and it's just like, I don't want to fall in love, I want to go on an adventure. And I am looking forward to, I think, my take, and I don't know if this is a hot take or not, hopefully it's not, I feel like romantasy had its peak where it's just like everything romantasy, romance everything, right? But I feel like, unlike other trends that go up and then fall down, I feel like romantasy went up, and I feel like it's just going to like slowly taper off versus hitting, like, instead of plummeting. Because like you said, I think it's always going to be there, but I think it's going to also open up more room for stories where it's just like, this is the adventure. That's it. Like, we're here for a good time. We're here for the epic. We're here for the dragons. We're here for the vampires. We're here for the political. We're here for the dark academia. We're here for all of it. And nobody falls in love. Or if they do fall in love, it's a minor part of the story versus the whole thing. So I'm excited for what's coming up and down the pipeline and what this opens up the door for, if that makes sense. Like you said, bringing in more readers.
I think you're right, because, and I'm not going to be able to name them because I've got a memory of a goldfish, but there are a couple of new romance imprints, I believe, that have come out of fantasy imprints. And so I think it's what you say, it will taper off. I think the two will maybe hope, there's room for everybody. And, I think the creation of those imprints is good, because there are authors I know who have written what I would consider to be like straight fantasy books with minimal romance, and they've kind of been shoved into the romance box. And then I see people saying, oh, this was advertised as romantasy, but there's almost no romance, and the poor author is like tearing their hair out because they didn't ever class it as romantasy. But certain figures within their imprint have said, no, we've got to stick this label on it. So hopefully there will be less of that as the tapering happens.
Absolutely. I think that's another conversation that could definitely be had of like the business aspect of being like, you have this thing, especially as Black authors or as any type of author who writes something that's genre blending or kind of hasn't been seen before in the way that it's expected, because there are definitely some books that fit very neatly into a box. Like, it's very solidly romance, it's very solidly thriller, it's very solidly horror, it's very solidly, insert genre here. And it's like, okay, cool, great. But I feel like there are some really amazing stories too that are like, it's not quite this, but it's not quite that either. It's very uniquely its own thing. And I think sometimes as consumers, as readers, we're like, give me the unique thing. I want to read something that I haven't read yet. But on the business side of it, it's like, how do I market this thing that is its own thing, especially if it doesn't come with its own built-in marketing and its own built-in fan base and its own built-in yada yada yada.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have a whole conversation about that, but that's not what this podcast is about. So I have a couple more questions for you. One being, A Song of Legends Lost is out. You said book 2 is coming next year, like a couple of months, honestly. Like, I know we just hit fall, but like, you're talking about spring, summer. Like, that is right around the corner.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about book 2?
It's even more of a chonker. It's the first thing to get out of the way. It's even longer. It has a lot more battles. I love battles. And this one is more battle focused. Its tone, I would say, is darker. Some pretty traumatic things happen to some of the characters. It focuses more on these creatures called Greybloods, which are, I don't want to say too much about them, but the short of it is, without being spoilery, they're kind of the antagonists of book 1 and are these monsters, I don't want to say anymore, who attack the realm. There's a lot more about them and their origin and various other things. And yeah, I think you learn more about the ancestral realm and more about the history of the world. That's what I can say without being too spoilery.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And this is a trilogy. So can we assume that because book 2 is getting ready to come out, you are already like knee deep in book 3?
Yeah, I want to say I'm knee deep. I'm like emotionally knee deep. Like, realistically, I have one toe in the water in terms of what I could show you. I have a very chaotic way of drafting. Yeah, I'm working on book 3 at the moment, and it's really interesting because, when most of us writing this type of fantasy, we are writing series, and I don't think I had prepared my mind for the idea of finishing this trilogy when I set out. So it's really exciting, but also scary, bringing everything together into a conclusion. I've known the ultimate endpoint for a long time. How I get there is another matter. So yeah, I'm currently working on book 3, and really I've just started to enjoy it. But I have a lot of loose ends to tie together, so let's see how it goes.
I believe in you. I believe in you. And I understand where you're coming from 100%. The thing that I'm working on currently, now that I mentioned that Project Necromancer is done and I'm querying it, I am finishing up my trilogy. So the 3rd book of my Wrath of the Gods series comes out, and I'm planning for it to come out next year. And it's just kind of like, wow, like, I've been living with these characters and like the next adventure, the next story for so long. And now it's just like, I got to wrap this up. I got to put a bow on it and send it off. And it's like, that's crazy, Like, also, I think for me, I'm like, I'm ready for it because definitely the characters lived in a different era that I am thankfully no longer in.
Yeah.
But it's also like, this has been like such a core part. It's kind of like, you know what it is? Okay, I know you're from the UK. Are you familiar with Toy Story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like Andy packing up his toys to go off to college, to an extent. Yeah. It's like, wow, I've spent so much time with these things, and it's sentimental. Like, these characters are sentimental. They like grew with me and like got me through tough moments. And now I'm ready to be like, okay, the job is done. The book is done. The series is done. There is no next book after this.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. I mean, again, going back to what we were saying about writing something during querying, as I say, I wrote something else during querying. I didn't finish it, but I was so excited to write that thing. So I'm kind of excited to get to that. So that helps. I will miss these characters, as you say, and they've been part of me for a long time, but I have another epic fantasy series that I want to write and I really want to get to it. So that is spurring me on because I can't really start or return to that until I finish this. So that helps, having the next set of characters to look forward to. And I'm sure it's the same for you with,
Oh, yeah.
the book you're querying.
Absolutely. I was literally talking to my author counsel about this morning, like before we got on this call, and I'm like, I have so many ideas. Like there are so many ideas
Yeah.
scribbled down, and I'm just like, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to write this, and I want to write that, and I'm like, there's so many stories, and I think that is kind of what, at least for me as like an individual, cements like I want this as a career. Like there are so
Yeah.
many stories that I want. It's not just a one-off. It's not just this one book. And I mean, obviously I know that because I've got several books under my belt at this point. But it's just like I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for you and what's to come. And book 2, book 3, the next epic series, like I'm so excited to see you thrive in this space. Like I'm looking forward to it. I'm so looking forward to it.
Thank you.
That being said, 2 questions that I ask everyone. First one being, what lasting effect would you like to leave on people who pick up your work?
I think so. The 2 things that I always want, and this will probably be the same for anything I write, anything I do creatively. The first one is that I hope they enjoyed their time. Ultimately, we write to connect, but also to entertain. So I hope that the book connects with people. Well, I know it does, some people, because they've told me, and it's a beautiful thing, and that they had a good time and are distracted from the world on fire for a few minutes by my book. And then the second thing that I always hope for is that people, and again, this is a whole conversation about science fiction fantasy in particular, I hope that people will look at the world differently. Ultimately, when we write science fiction and fantasy, we are exploring different ways of looking at the world, different structures, social structures, political structures. And I hope that they take that energy of thinking differently, how things can be different. I hope they take that energy with them out into the world in order for us to make our own world a better place. Because I think the more we exercise the muscles of not accepting the status quo and thinking about how things can be different, the better for our species. Not to get too serious, but that is another thing that I hope people take away from my book. But ultimately, I just want them to have a good time.
I love it, especially the part about having a good time, because I feel like sometimes as authors, we can get wrapped up in making sure that the theme and the message and the relevancy come across. And it's just like, at the end of the day, I want you to have a good time. Like, even if I'm not writing the thing that's going to last, decades from now, and I'm not the next classic, it's just like, okay, but when you read it, when you picked it up, when you spent how many ever hours with this story and these characters, did you have a good time? Because if you did, I did my job, and that's what I'm here to do, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you learn something from it too, great. Kudos. Bonus points. Sprinkles on the cake. I digress. Last question. And I ask everyone this, no matter how many times they come on the podcast. And that is, what writing advice would you give to any new authors who are just now starting out on their writing journey?
So my main number one piece of advice is always finish the thing, finish it. It can be, in your opinion, trash, but you need to finish it. And it's probably, especially if you're marginalized, especially if you're Black, it is probably better than you think, because we, those of us who grew up not seeing ourselves or who are underrepresented in the world as it is projected back to us, have an uphill struggle in that regard. So finish the thing, believe in the thing. If it's not finished, you have nothing to work with, so to speak. So my advice is to keep going, and that extends to all stages of the writing process. Really keep going, because it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's true. You have to stick with it. And my other piece of advice is not all advice is good advice. You have to, anytime someone gives you a piece of advice, you take what resonates with you, what you feel is relevant to you, and you disregard the rest, because not all people with certain experience or in certain positions, well, putting it bluntly, they don't always know what they're talking about, but also putting it less bluntly, their advice might not apply to you. So it can, especially with so much information on the internet, there's a lot of noise. And I think it's important to take what enriches you as a creative person and just disregard the rest, because self-belief is so important, and it's something that I struggle with, but it is really important. So yeah, keep going. That's final thought.
Absolutely. I second all of that, because like, one, you have to finish the thing. Like, finishing the thing is the hardest part of all of this. No matter how many times you do it, getting to the end is the difficult part. So keep going and trust that like you're doing this for a reason, right? Everything has purpose to it. Even if you don't know what that purpose is in the moment, it has purpose to it. So like, trust yourself, keep going, finish. And then also, I agree also with discernment. Like, every piece of advice is not worth it. You can honestly, with anything, you could Google like, how do I do, this? How do I query someone? And you're going to get so many pieces of advice. And even in this podcast alone, you mentioned, doing it in batches, doing it all at once. And you mentioned also just picking one or two and sending that out. There's so many ways to go about it. So having discernment of not only what is the advice, but how does it apply to you? How can you make it work for you? And trusting that if what you are doing is different from what other people are doing, that doesn't inherently make what you are doing wrong, especially if it feels right for you. I think I will add to that, don't be afraid to change your mind. This is a journey. And the more you know, the more you question things sometimes. And it's okay to pivot. It is okay to decide that, okay, I started writing this book and I just knew from the beginning it was going to be a thriller. And then as we got into it, it turned into a horror comedy. And it's just like, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to let go of what you thought something would be or the way it would be, and go with the thing that serves you right now. Especially because writing is such a journey, right? The thing that serves you in this moment may not be the same thing that serves you a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And it's okay if the idea and the plan that you have at step 1 is not the same idea and the plan you have at step 10. You know more, you've done more, you've got more experience. So
absolutely,
leave yourself open to the possibilities.
Definitely. And you learn about yourself through this process as well. You change yourself when you're creating. So, you need to be able to adapt as you change too.
Absolutely. So that being said, we are coming up on an hour. So Ayinde, if you would, please let the people know where to find you and how to support.
I am on most social media as a social media addict as at Ayinde, same handle everywhere. I have a newsletter which you can sign up to on my website, mhayinde.com. And book 2 of the Invoker trilogy is out next year. I don't know if it's available for pre-order yet. I don't think so, but it should be soon. So keep an eye on my socials for that.
Awesome. Do you have a cover release yet?
No, but today, hot off the press, I think I saw what is nearly a final version of it. So hopefully soon. Very exciting. I'm really excited for people to see it. I think they're gonna like it.
Okay. All right. That being said, you guys, that is it for this episode of the Written Melanin Podcast. If you'd like to support this podcast, then please share it with someone you think may enjoy it. Join our membership on the Melanin Library website. Grab a copy of my books from my website, cmlockhart.com, or donate to the podcast so that we can continue making content for you guys with amazing authors like M.H. Ayinde. There are links in the show notes for everything, and thank you guys again so much for listening. Until next time, I hope all your books are full of melanin.